Many, many interesting things on this follow-up. I wanted to talk about, there's one guy you talked to, he was the lone black guy there.
Yeah, Jones.
Talk about his perspective.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, and that's what hit me first.
Yeah. Jones was the only African American in the platoon. I think there's an idea back in the States among civilians that somehow the frontline infantry is like, mostly African Americans or something, and that wasn't true in Vietnam, and it's not true anymore. I mean, actually it's the reverse. I mean, as Jones was saying, there's almost no black guys at all in frontline infantry. It's really, what he called sort of suburban white dudes, and he didn't say suburban, but that's sort of what he meant. It's like these are middle-class white guys. Their dads fought in Vietnam, probably. Maybe their grandfathers in World War II. They grew up playing war, as children, and they wanted to experience combat. And in Jones's opinion, he had a couple of, when he was growing up in Reno, he had a few brushes with the law. I think he was from a pretty rough neighborhood, and in his words, he was like, black folks don't like to get shot at. Like, why would they? And so they go into other units that are doing logistics or repair or whatever, the many jobs that the military requires to keep the Army running. But the frontline combat units, typically it's mostly white and Latino, interestingly.
It's very interesting because he's right when it comes to that, because we've already went through that point. We know what's going to happen. We don't have to go over there to see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like I've always said, I don't have to go to an island to become a survivor. I'm already a survivor.
Right.
And that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
So it's good to see the follow-up on this, because I saw an interview with you on Morning Joe, which is my favorite show. But at the same time, I'm like going back and visiting and seeing what was going on with the guys again. What was that first feeling like for you? As soon as you stepped down on the ground, what was that first feeling like for you again?
You mean when I would go back out to the valley, or working on the
valley?
Yeah, all the footage in Korengal is taken from the original shoot in 07, 08, and Tim and I each did 5 one-month trips, roughly, and sometimes we were together, sometimes we weren't. But we always came in by helicopter, and you'd look out, and if there was red smoke, it would mean the LZ was taking fire, and if there was no smoke, it meant it was all right, and that made a huge difference in your state of mind. When they opened the doors up and you ran out of the helicopter, it was pretty intense if there was red smoke. And but I was always glad to be back there. I loved it out there.
You like that adrenaline rush in a way, but it's always weird when you come back. So when they come back, they have this letdown feeling. I think it's the same for you too, right?
Yeah, if you're exposed to that much adrenaline, and also, important not to forget, the other component of the experience is a huge amount of human connection. You are connected to people. Ironically, it's a war, but you are connected to people way more deeply than in civilian life. You're sleeping shoulder to shoulder with 20 guys. Where I slept, they built these plywood hooches at Restrepo, which had no internet, no phone, no nothing, right? It was just on a hillside, on a ridge line. They built these little plywood hooches to sleep in, and if I stretched my arm out, I could touch 3 other men where I slept. And that's really intense closeness. And when those guys came home, they missed the adrenaline, the combat, and all that, but I think they also missed that connection. I think they felt very disoriented, suddenly being let loose in this wide open, alienated American society where everyone's on their iPhones and watching TV or whatever, and I think it just killed them.
I've been doing a lot of stuff with cell phones for soldiers in the One the Warrior project, fixing cell phones and devices and stuff like that. So every day we make homage to that, and any war film that's ever been done, I've had talked to every single one of them when they came back, and it's been very, very interesting. And at the same time, not having a lot of things to do, but at the same time, some of the people would leave and have an argument, but once they get over there, it's about being with their buddies. And then wondering, did I make a mistake? Did I say my last goodbye? That's got to be a strange feeling for those guys.
Yeah, I had this terrible experience that, in some ways, that they didn't have, which is every time I left there, I didn't know of all these guys, like, if any of them was going to get killed. And that was, that was really, I was really fond of them. And as for what, for all the stuff those guys went through, they weren't saying goodbye to each other all the time. And I came and went 5 times, and I worried so much when I was in New York. as I got closer and closer to them, I really worried about, God, what happens if they get overrun up there? What happens if, that was hard. That really was hard. And I was always relieved to get back there and see that everyone was okay. And I became very, very invested in it.
What do you hope the audience gets out of seeing this movie?
Restrepo was an attempt to have audiences indirectly experience combat. You're in that dark room for 90 minutes. There's no news footage. There's no musical score. There's no narration. It's just you're on that hilltop with those guys. Korengal is different. I wanted Korengal to be, rephrase that. Korengal is different. I want Korengal to be a way for soldiers to understand and validate the experiences they had in combat. And combat affects them in very good ways and very bad ways. And by extension, if soldiers can understand it more fully, maybe civilians can as well. And the next big project this country has on its hands is reincorporating 3 million vets, not all of them combat vets, but still 3 million vets back into society. And I think the better we understand the emotional consequences of combat, the better we will be able to reincorporate them.
What's a favorite memory you have of Tim?
I've got so many great memories of Tim, but one was right after I met him. On my second trip to the Korengal, I brought Tim. It was his first trip. We started working a few months into the deployment and started working together. And Tim had his press card on a red lanyard. They give you these stupid press cards with red lanyards, and you're supposed to wear them, but of course you don't. And so, but he tied his around his waist so he wouldn't lose it. And I'm sure I lost mine immediately. But he was in the latrine, which is just camouflage netting over a 55-gallon drum that had been cut in half. I mean, you can imagine. And one of the soldiers, a guy named Vandenberg, saw Tim pull his pants down and saw this sort of red thing around his waist. And he just sat with this for a while, and he finally went to the lieutenant and said, "Sir, I think the English guy is wearing a red thong." And the Lieutenant Piosa didn't know what to make of this. And he thought about it for a while. And, Tim's English, so who knows? I mean, these guys don't know. Like, maybe Englishmen wear thongs. I mean, they just don't know, right? And so the lieutenant finally brought it up with Tim, and I was there, and he said, "Tim, are you wearing a red thong? I really do kind of have to ask." And when Tim realized, no, it's the lanyard to his press pass, I mean, he just collapsed laughing. He was laughing so hard. He was on the ground. He was laughing so hard. It was a wonderful moment.
Last question. Most important thing, let's talk about how you raise money for this, because this is tough. It's tough to do that. It's very important.
Tim and I completely paid for the making of Restrepo. We shot it ourselves, we paid for the edit, we paid for the whole thing and sold the finished film to Nat Geo, National Geographic, to distribute. With Korengal, not only did my partners at Goldcrest and I, pay to make the film, we are self-distributing. We're not even selling it to a broadcaster. We're doing the entire thing ourselves. And we raised money for that by doing a Kickstarter campaign, which was very successful. I mean, in 2 days, we reached our goal of $75,000. We also put our own money into it. We raised a little money by selling broadcast rights in UK. It's a small victory for independent film. As soon as you sell to a distributor, they're calling the shots. They take 90% of all the money that's made on the film. I mean, they really kind of have you over a barrel. And because we have a huge demographic that's quite loyal, they really, veterans and families, they really liked Restrepo. And we were able to sort of leverage that and access it to remain completely independent in this whole process. And I think it's really kind of a cool thing.
Good for you. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.